Commander Zixathala had conquered 47 star systems, obliterated entire civilizations with a single thought, and once made a black hole surrender just by staring at it menacingly. So when his quantum detection arrays picked up what could only be described as the most aggressive war signal ever transmitted across the galaxy, he did what any self-respecting destroyer of worlds would do. He gathered the Korthvac Dominion's most elite warriors and prepared to show these upstart humans why they were about to become the 48th notch on his cosmic belt of universal domination. The signal was relentless. Every few seconds, the same pattern. A desperate cry for connection, broadcasting coordinates, demanding access, practically screaming across subspace with the intensity of a dying star. Military frequency analysis indicated it was some sort of battle cry. The pattern, Netflix guest network, password 1123456, was clearly a coded war chant, probably meaning something terrifyingly violent in human tongue. What the Korthvac didn't realize was that Mrs. Gertrude Plimpkins from apartment 4B had been trying to connect her smart TV to the neighbor's Wi-Fi for the past 3 hours, and her repeated attempts were somehow getting amplified through a nearby radio telescope that a graduate student named Blix Wonderton had accidentally left pointing in entirely the wrong direction while he was busy discovering that cafeteria coffee could dissolve small electronics. Zixathala assembled his war council in the doomship Obliterator, a vessel so intimidating that it had its own gravitational field of pure menace. His lieutenant, Groxmar the Bone Crusher, studied the tactical readouts with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for diffusing universe-ending weapons. "Commander, these humans appear to be broadcasting from multiple strategic locations simultaneously," Groxmar announced, his 12 eyes glowing with professional admiration. "The coordination is flawless. Look at this tactical spread." He was, of course, looking at a map showing every household in suburban Denver trying to connect to various Wi-Fi networks. The Korthvac interpreted the scattered signals as evidence of a sophisticated military communication grid. The fact that most of these signals were named things like "Click here for virus" and "FBI surveillance van 3" only convinced them further that humans were masters of psychological warfare. Meanwhile, on Earth, Blix Wonderton was having the worst day of his doctoral thesis. His radio telescope was picking up what sounded like angry space static. His coffee had eaten through his calculator, and Professor Mumblebottom kept insisting that proper scientific methodology meant he couldn't just point the giant space listening device wherever looked most interesting that day. "Blix, dear boy," Professor Mumblebottom said, adjusting his spectacles that hadn't been the right prescription since the Carter administration. "You can't just wave that telescope around like you're conducting an orchestra. There are protocols." "But, Professor," Blix replied, frantically trying to decode what appeared to be structured communications from somewhere near the Horsehead Nebula, "I think we might actually be receiving first contact signals. Listen to this pattern." What they were actually hearing was Commander Zixathala's battle fleet warming up their engines of infinite destruction while broadcasting standard Korthvac war hymns, which sounded remarkably similar to a garbage disposal trying to eat a bicycle. The Korthvac fleet approached Earth with the confidence of warriors who had never lost a battle, mainly because they had never encountered an opponent quite like humanity. Their ships bristled with weapons that could crack moons, shields that could deflect supernovas, and targeting systems so advanced they could calculate the exact trajectory needed to make an enemy's defeat both devastating and aesthetically pleasing. As they entered Earth's solar system, Groxmar began conducting standard pre-invasion reconnaissance. What he discovered defied all military logic. "Commander," he reported, his voice trembling with either excitement or terror, "the humans appear to be deliberately ignoring our approach." This was true. NASA had detected the incoming fleet 3 days earlier, but due to a filing error, the report had been sent to the Department of Agriculture, who assumed it was some sort of unusual weather pattern and recommended that farmers in Kansas plant their corn a week earlier than usual. "What?" Zixthala roared. "Impossible. No species has ever ignored the approach of the doomship obliterator." "Sir, it gets worse," Groxmar continued, his tactical display showing live feeds of Earth's surface. They're continuing their daily activities as if we don't exist. Look at this." The screen showed a live feed of downtown Los Angeles during rush hour. To the Korthvak, this appeared to be the most chaotically brilliant military exercise they had ever witnessed. Thousands of vehicles moving in seemingly random patterns, stopping and starting according to no discernible strategy. Drivers communicating through a complex system of horn-based signals that the aliens interpreted as advanced battle coordination. "Magnificent!" Zixthala whispered in awe. "They're conducting massive troop movements right in front of us, and look at their psychological warfare tactics." He was watching Harold Finsterbush, a middle-aged accountant who had just discovered his parking meter had expired and was now performing what the Korthvak analyzed as an intimidating war dance around his Honda Civic, while shouting what they assumed were battle cries, but were actually creative combinations of profanity that Harold had learned during his brief stint in community theater. The more the Korthvak observed, the more disturbed they became. Human behavior was completely unpredictable. They watched as humans voluntarily entered small metal boxes that moved at tremendous speeds, apparently for recreational purposes. They witnessed humans gathering in large groups to watch other humans engage in ritualized combat, involving the strategic movement of a spherical object, while consuming what appeared to be ceremonial beverages that made them louder and more emotionally unstable. "Sir," whispered Sub-Commander Clacksmith, the fleet's senior analyst, "I'm beginning to think we may have severely underestimated these creatures." This assessment was based on his observation of a suburban soccer match, which he had interpreted as a training exercise for some sort of ground-based warfare involving precise footwork, strategic positioning, and the ability to argue passionately with authority figures. The fact that this training was being conducted by 8-year-olds only convinced him that human military preparation began at an impossibly young age. But what truly shook the Korthvak to their warrior cause was what happened when they attempted their standard intimidation protocol. Following galactic war conventions, they transmitted a message of impending conquest to all major Earth communication networks. The message, translated into what their computers assured them was perfect human language, read, "Puny humans, prepare for your doom. The mighty Korthvak Dominion demands your immediate surrender or face annihilation beyond your comprehension." The message was successfully broadcast to every television network, radio station, and internet service provider on the planet. The human response was not what they expected. Within minutes, their communication arrays were flooded with replies, thousands of them, but instead of pleas for mercy or counter-threats, they received messages like, "LOL nice, try buddy. Mum says dinner's ready. Has anyone seen my car keys? And this is spam. Unsubscribe me from this list." Commander Zixthala stared at the incoming communications with the expression of someone who had just discovered that his universal translator might have been installed upside down. "Groxmar," he said slowly, Are they mocking us?" I believe so, sir," Groxmar replied, watching as more messages poured in. Someone had apparently started a thread about whether the alien message was viral marketing for a new movie, and the discussion had devolved into an argument about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. One message stood out from the rest. It came from Trixie Bumblethwaite, a 12-year-old from Nebraska who had seen the broadcast during her lunch break and decided to respond, "Dear aliens, that's super cool that you can talk to us. My mom says I can't have friends over during the week, but maybe you could come to my birthday party on Saturday. We're having cake. P.S. My goldfish, Mr." Bubbles says hi. The Korthvak military analysis computer, designed to decode complex battle strategies and identify threats, processed this message for 17 hours before determining that it was either the most sophisticated psychological warfare gambit in galactic history, or evidence that humans had achieved such an advanced state of consciousness that they had transcended the very concept of fear. "Commander," Subcommander Klaxoneth reported with growing panic, "I've been analyzing their infrastructure, and I think we need to abort this invasion immediately." "What? Explain yourself." "Sir, observe their transportation networks." Klaxoneth brought up a holographic display of Earth's highway systems. "They've constructed the most elaborate defensive maze in galactic history. Look at this." He was showing them the Los Angeles freeway system during rush hour. To the Korthvak, the traffic patterns looked like the most sophisticated military defensive strategy ever conceived. Vehicles moved in complex, seemingly random patterns, with multiple layers of confusion designed to trap and disorient any invading force. "And, sir," Klaxoneth continued, his voice rising in pitch, "they've created thousands of these fortress complexes." He displayed an aerial view of a typical shopping mall. Multiple entrances and exits, internal mazes designed to confuse invaders, and look at this psychological warfare. The display showed Black Friday footage from a department store. The Korthvak watched in horror as humans engaged in what appeared to be ritualized combat training, fighting over resources with a level of strategic aggression that made their own warrior culture look like a poetry reading. But the final straw came when their scouts attempted to conduct closer reconnaissance. Following standard protocol, they sent stealth probes to observe human military installations. The first probe was dispatched to what their intelligence indicated was a major strategic command center. It was actually Denny's at 3 a.m. The probe's first transmission back to the fleet was a video feed of Marlene Crankshaw, a night shift waitress who had been working double shifts for 3 weeks straight and had reached a state of caffeinated transcendence that bordered on the supernatural. She was simultaneously taking orders from 6 different tables, refilling coffee cups with the precision of a Swiss watch, and maintaining a conversation with Bob the cook about the philosophical implications of hash browns while mentally calculating tips down to the penny. "Dear gods of war," Zixthala whispered as he watched the feed. "Look at that coordination, that multitasking. She's operating with at least 12 different strategic parameters simultaneously." The probe's audio pickups caught Marlene saying, "Honey, you want that coffee refilled, or are you just going to sit there staring at it like it owes you money?" to a customer who had been nursing the same cup for 40 minutes. The Korthvak computer analyzed this statement for 3 hours before determining that it was an advanced form of psychological conditioning designed to optimize resource consumption while maintaining tactical advantage over potential threats. "Commander," Groxmar reported with growing desperation, "the probe is transmitting evidence of some sort of resource conversion facility. They appear to be taking raw materials and transforming them into something. The process is terrifying." They were watching Bob flip pancakes. The alien computer interpreted this as humans demonstrating their ability to manipulate matter at the molecular level through the application of controlled heat and gravity manipulation, suggesting technological capabilities far beyond anything the Korthvak had ever encountered. When Bob casually caught a pancake mid-flip and deposited it perfectly on a plate, 3 Korthvak tactical analysts fainted simultaneously. The second probe was sent to investigate what appeared to be a massive military training facility. It was actually Planet Fitness during the lunch rush. The probe's camera focused on Margaret Pumpenheimer, a 63-year-old retired librarian who had decided that her golden years were the perfect time to discover that she could deadlift twice her body weight. "Impossible!" Zixthala screamed as he watched Margaret complete her 3rd set of bench presses while casually discussing her grandson's college plans with her workout partner. She's demonstrating physical capabilities that exceed our genetic enhancement programs. The aliens were so focused on Margaret's impressive strength training that they completely missed the guy in the corner who was trying to figure out how the elliptical machine worked and had been moving backwards for 20 minutes. But what finally broke the Korthvak's warrior spirit was the third probe's discovery at what they identified as Earth's most critical strategic installation, the International Space Station. Astronaut Commander Jolinda Spasikowski was conducting routine maintenance on the external communications array, which involved floating in the vacuum of space, using tools with the casual expertise of someone changing a light bulb, while simultaneously troubleshooting a software glitch through voice commands to ground control. Houston, the tertiary backup system is showing a minor fluctuation in the quantum flux indicators, Jolinda reported calmly, while literally hanging upside down in space, fixing equipment with one hand and taking notes with the other. Copy that, Jolinda. Can you try cycling the secondary harmonics through the backup protocols? Came the reply from ground control, delivered with the same tone someone might use to ask if you could pass the salt. To the Korthvak, this casual conversation about manipulating quantum-level technology while performing impossible acrobatics in the most hostile environment in the universe was conclusive proof that humans had achieved a level of technological and physical evolution that made conquest not just difficult but potentially suicidal. "Commander," whispered Groxmar, his 12 eyes now permanently fixed in an expression of existential dread, "I don't think they're ignoring us because they don't consider us a threat. I think they're ignoring us because we're so far beneath their capabilities that we don't even register as worth noticing." The final blow to Korthvak morale came when Subcommander Klaxneth discovered what he initially interpreted as evidence of human recreational warfare. He had stumbled upon a live stream of the World Series, where he watched pitcher Tommy Fastball McGillicuddy throw a baseball at 97 miles per hour with such precision that he could hit a target smaller than a dinner plate from 60 feet away, while under the psychological pressure of 40,000 screaming spectators and millions of viewers analyzing his every move. "They've weaponized recreational activities," Klaxneth reported in panic. "This human can launch projectiles with deadly accuracy while maintaining perfect composure under massive psychological stress. And look at the crowd. They're cheering for this demonstration of combat capabilities." The aliens watched in fascination and terror as the camera panned across the stadium, showing humans consuming massive quantities of liquid while maintaining perfect coordination in complex group chants, all while processing statistical information about the ongoing combat. Demonstration with casual expertise. "And Commander," Klaxneth added, his voice now reaching frequencies that only other Korthvak could hear, "they appear to have entire industries dedicated to analyzing and predicting the outcomes of these combat simulations. They've turned warfare into entertainment." This was the moment when Commander Zixa Thala, conqueror of 47 star systems, destroyer of civilizations, the being who had once made a black hole blink first, made a decision that would echo through galactic history. He opened a direct communication channel to Earth. "This is Commander Zix Thala of the Korthvak Dominion," he announced with as much dignity as he could muster. We officially surrender." The message was received by the same graduate student, Blix Wonderton, who had been accidentally eavesdropping on alien communications all week. Blix, who had consumed enough cafeteria coffee to power a small city, processed this information with the sort of academic excitement that comes from realizing your thesis is about to become the most important document in human history. "Professor Mumblebottom!" Blix shouted, bursting into the observatory office with printouts of the alien transmission. "The space people want to give up. They haven't even started fighting yet." Professor Mumblebottom, who had spent 40 years studying radio signals from space and had never received so much as a cosmic hiccup, looked at the data with the expression of a man who had just discovered that his life's work had been accidentally solved by a caffeinated graduate student with a broken radio telescope. "Blix, dear boy," Professor Mumblebottom said slowly, "I think you may have just—" "What did they say exactly?" "They surrendered," Blix replied, bouncing on his feet with nervous energy. "They said they surrender before doing anything. It's like they saw us and just gave up." This information made its way through proper academic channels, which meant it was immediately buried under 17 layers of bureaucracy, peer review processes, and committee meetings to discuss whether they needed a committee to determine if they required a committee to handle first contact protocols. Meanwhile, Commander Zixthala was dealing with his own bureaucratic challenges. The Galactic Council of Universal Conquest had specific protocols for invasion outcomes. There were procedures for victory, defeat, strategic withdrawal, and Pyrrhic victory. There was no procedure for surrendering before the battle started because the enemy was too terrifying to fight. "Commander," Groxmar said carefully, "how exactly do we file a report that says we were defeated by beings who never realized we were at war with them?" This was indeed the central problem. The Korthvak had spent 3 weeks preparing for invasion, had observed human capabilities, had conducted reconnaissance, had prepared surrender documents, and had officially capitulated to a species that remained completely unaware that any of this had happened. At that very moment, the human who had started this entire cosmic misunderstanding, Mrs. Gertrude Plimpkins, was sitting in her living room, finally having successfully connected to her neighbor's Wi-Fi, and was now engaged in what the Korthvak would have analyzed as advanced strategic planning, but was actually her trying to remember her Netflix password. Was it password 123 or password 1234? She muttered to herself, completely unaware that her technological struggles had caused the most advanced military civilization in the galaxy to question their fundamental understanding of power, strength, and the nature of warfare itself. The surrender ceremony, such as it was, took place entirely through electronic communications. Commander Zixthala transmitted the official Korthvak surrender documents, which included formal recognition of human supremacy, agreements to provide technological assistance, and a solemn promise never to approach Earth with hostile intentions again. These documents were received by NASA's Deep Space Communications Array, processed by the computer system, and automatically filed under miscellaneous space noise, because the filing algorithm couldn't categorize a message that said, "We give up," coming from coordinates that weren't supposed to have anyone living there. Dr. Miranda Stellarweather, the duty officer who first read the translated messages, spent 3 hours cross-referencing stellar coordinates, running diagnostic tests on the translation software, and drinking increasingly stronger coffee before reaching the conclusion that either humanity had just been contacted by aliens who immediately surrendered, or the computer system had achieved consciousness and was now playing elaborate pranks. "Jenkins," she called to her colleague, "come look at this. Either we've made first contact, or our computer has developed a sense of humor." Dr. Jenkins, whose full name was Dr. Algernon Percival Jenkins III, but who preferred to be called Al, because he felt it made him sound less like a character from a Victorian novel, reviewed the data with the methodical approach of a scientist who had spent his career analyzing radio signals and finding absolutely nothing interesting. "Miranda," he said slowly, "I think these might actually be legitimate communications from an extraterrestrial intelligence." "That's what I was afraid you'd say," Miranda replied, "because according to this, they're surrendering to us." Surrendering? Surrendering. Completely. They're offering to share technology, provide assistance, and they've promised never to bother us again. They seem to think we're some sort of super-advanced warrior civilization. Al looked at the messages, then at Miranda, then at the vending machine in the corner that had been eating people's quarters for 6 months, because nobody could figure out how to fix it. Should we tell someone? He asked. This question launched a debate that would consume the next several hours, as Miranda and Al tried to determine the proper protocol for informing the government that humanity had apparently won a war they never knew they were fighting against an enemy they had never met. Back in space, Commander Zix Thala was conducting his own version of this conversation with his war council, except with more tentacles and significantly more advanced technology. "So let me understand this correctly," said Subcommander Claxneth. "We invaded their space. They ignored us. We studied their capabilities. We were terrified by their casual competence, and now we've surrendered to them. But they don't know any of this happened?" "That appears to be an accurate summary," Zix Thala replied, with the tone of someone who was beginning to question not just this particular military operation, but his entire approach to interstellar conquest. "Sir," Groxmar interjected, "there is one more complication." "More complications?" Zix Thala asked, his voice carrying the sort of exhaustion typically reserved for tax preparation or furniture assembly. "The humans have responded to our surrender. Every being in the War Council chamber focused their various optical organs on Groxmar with the intensity of laser weapons charging up." "They responded?" Zix Thala asked carefully. "Yes, sir. The message says, and I quote, 'Thank you for your interest in Earth. We're excited to learn more about your civilization. Would you like to participate in our cultural exchange program? We have cookies.'" The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that typically occurs just before stars collapse into black holes. "They're inviting us to a cultural exchange program," Zix Thala repeated slowly. "With cookies," Groxmar confirmed. This message had been composed by Dr. Miranda Stellarweather, who had decided that if humanity was going to engage in first contact with an alien civilization, they might as well be polite about it. She had spent considerable time crafting what she believed to be an appropriately welcoming response, including information about human culture, an invitation to share knowledge, and a mention of cookies, because she felt it represented humanity's commitment to hospitality. What she didn't realize was that her casual mention of cookies was being analyzed by the galaxy's most advanced military computers as potential evidence of human chemical warfare capabilities. "Commander," Subcommander Claxneth reported with growing panic, "our analysis indicates that these cookies may be some sort of biochemical weapon. The humans appear to use them as a method of establishing psychological dominance through involuntary chemical dependency. Our research shows that humans become emotionally attached to these substances and will perform complex behaviors to obtain them." Lee. This analysis was based on the Korthvac computer's investigation of human internet traffic, where it had discovered millions of references to cookies, including people expressing intense emotional attachment to them, elaborate rituals for their preparation, and evidence that humans would travel great distances and pay significant resources to obtain high-quality versions. "Sir," Groxmar added, "they've also invited us to something called a cultural exchange program. Our intelligence suggests this may be a method of psychological conditioning designed to make us adopt human behavioral patterns until we become dependent on their social structures." Aye, the aliens had discovered social media and had interpreted the human tendency to share personal information, form digital communities, and engage in complex social interactions as evidence of a sophisticated mind control system designed to create loyal followers through carefully crafted psychological manipulation. Commander Zix Thala stared at the analysis reports with the expression of someone who had just realized that retiring early and opening a small cafe on a peaceful moon somewhere might be a more attractive career option than galactic conquest. "Send a response," he ordered finally. Tell them we accept their invitation." Sachai, this decision was based not on military strategy or diplomatic protocol, but on the growing realization that the alternative, attempting to understand human behavior without direct contact, might actually drive the entire Korthvac fleet insane. The response was received by Dr. Miranda Stellarweather just as she was leaving work for the day. She read it with the sort of professional satisfaction that comes from successfully handling what might be the most important diplomatic communication in human history. "Dear humans," the message read, "we gratefully accept your invitation to cultural exchange. We are prepared to learn about your ways and share our knowledge with you. We are particularly interested in understanding these cookies you mentioned. When would be convenient for this exchange to begin?" Miranda printed out the message, made a copy for her files, locked both in her desk drawer, and went home to call her mother and tell her that she might be bringing some new friends to Thanksgiving dinner, and that they might be from another planet. And yes, Mom, she would remember to pick up extra cranberry sauce. The cultural exchange began 3 days later with what would later be remembered as the most awkward first contact in galactic history. The Korthvac dispatched a small diplomatic shuttle to Earth, piloted by Junior Ambassador Flix-O-Matic, whose primary qualifications were that he had once successfully negotiated a peace treaty with a sentient gas cloud and had been voted most likely to survive unusual diplomatic situations by his graduating class at the Galactic Academy of Conquest and Diplomacy. Flix-O-Matic landed his shuttle in the parking lot of the National Radio Observatory in West Virginia, which Dr. Miranda Stellarweather had suggested as a meeting location because it was relatively isolated and had good communication equipment. What she hadn't anticipated was that the sight of an actual alien spacecraft landing in a government facility parking lot would cause Security Chief Bixby Thornweather to respond according to his training, which involved a lot of shouting and the sort of bureaucratic procedures typically used for handling suspicious packages, not first contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. "Ma'am," Chief Thornweather reported to Miranda over his radio, There's a thing in parking spot 17. "A thing?" Miranda replied, grabbing her first contact preparation folder, which she had assembled over the past 3 days, and which contained mostly photocopied articles about diplomatic protocol and a recipe for chocolate chip cookies that she thought might come in handy. "It's shaped like a really fancy egg, but with lights and what might be wings, and it's humming." "Is it a threatening hum or a friendly hum?" Miranda asked, immediately realizing that this was probably not a question covered in standard security protocols. I don't know, ma'am. It's just humming, like it's thinking about something." This was actually accurate. Flix-O-Matic's shuttle was equipped with an artificial intelligence designed to analyze local conditions and cultural indicators to optimize diplomatic approaches. The AI was currently processing everything from local radio broadcasts to atmospheric composition, trying to determine the best strategy for making contact with humans without causing incidents that would require filling out diplomatic incident reports in triplicate. The AI had spent considerable processing power analyzing human music, news broadcasts, and television programming, and had reached the conclusion that humans communicated primarily through a complex system of emotional manipulation, commercial advertising, and references to popular culture that would require at least 300 years of study to fully comprehend. Flix-O-Matic emerged from his shuttle wearing the Korthvac formal diplomatic uniform, which looked like a combination of medieval armor and a disco ball, and carrying a translation device that his superiors assured him would handle any communication challenges that might arise during first contact. He approached the main building of the observatory with the careful steps of someone who had been trained in 17 different forms of interspecies combat, but was hoping desperately that none of them would be necessary today. Dr. Miranda Stellarweather met him at the front entrance, accompanied by Security Chief Thornweather, Dr. Jenkins, and a hastily assembled first contact team that included Professor Mumblebottom, the facility's senior janitor Carlos Mopsalot, and someone from the cafeteria who had volunteered because she was curious about alien dietary requirements. The moment of first contact between humanity and the Korthvac Dominion was marked by Junior Ambassador Flixomatic walking up to the group, activating his translation device and saying, "Greetings, mighty warriors of Earth. I come in peace to learn your ways of conquest." The translation device, which had been programmed using the Korthvac's military analysis of human communications, had interpreted standard diplomatic language through the filter of their assumption that humans were a hyper-advanced warrior civilization. What Flixomatic had actually intended to say was something closer to, "Hello, we come seeking peaceful cultural exchange and mutual understanding." Dr. Miranda Stellarweather, who had spent the past 3 days reading everything she could find about diplomatic protocol, responded with what she hoped was an appropriately welcoming greeting. "Welcome to Earth. We're honored by your visit and excited to learn about your civilization." Flixomatic's translation device processed this statement and informed him that the human had just declared herself excited to learn about methods of warfare and conquest, which confirmed his suspicions that humans were indeed the aggressive military civilization that his commanders had described. "I bring greetings from Commander Zixthala," Flixomatic continued, following the diplomatic script he had memorized, "and our gratitude for your acceptance of our surrender. We hope to learn from your superior tactical knowledge and cultural achievements." This statement created a moment of confused silence as the human first contact team tried to process the information that they had apparently accepted someone's surrender without realizing it. "I'm sorry," Dr. Jenkins said carefully. "Could you clarify what you mean by surrender? We weren't aware that there was any..." "A conflict?" Flixomatic consulted his translation device, which informed him that the humans were testing his knowledge of their military campaigns by pretending not to remember their recent victory. This was obviously a tactical assessment to determine whether the Korthvac had properly understood the scope of their defeat. "Of course," Flixomatic replied enthusiastically. "Your strategic demonstration of superior capabilities convinced our entire fleet that resistance would be futile. We were particularly impressed by your casual manipulation of quantum-level technology, your mastery of complex multitasking under pressure, and your ability to coordinate massive population movements while maintaining perfect psychological conditioning." The humans looked at each other with expressions typically reserved for people trying to solve advanced mathematics problems without having taken basic arithmetic. "Could you give us some specific examples?" Miranda asked, pulling out her notebook and preparing to take what she suspected would be very unusual notes. Flixomatic brightened considerably, interpreting this as a request for tactical debriefing. "Certainly. We were amazed by your demonstration of matter manipulation at the facility designated Denny's. The female operative displayed simultaneous coordination of multiple strategic objectives while maintaining perfect situational awareness. And your space-based operative demonstrated casual competence in quantum technology manipulation while operating in the vacuum of space with no apparent protective equipment." Professor Mumblebottom leaned over to Carlos Mopsalot and whispered, "I think they're talking about Marlene at the all-night diner and the astronauts on the space station." "Wait, Doctor," Jenkins said, his scientific training helping him identify the pattern. "Are you saying that you've been observing our normal daily activities and interpreting them as military demonstrations?" Flixomatic's translation device processed this question and determined that the human was testing whether the Korthvac had correctly identified human training exercises disguised as civilian activities. "Exactly," he confirmed. "We were particularly intimidated by your recreational warfare simulations and your ability to transform resource acquisition into competitive entertainment." "He's talking about baseball," Miranda whispered to the group, and probably shopping malls. This realization led to what would later be described in the official first contact reports as a period of mutual clarification regarding the nature of human activities and alien interpretations thereof. Dr. Miranda Stellarweather spent the next 2 hours explaining that humans were not actually an advanced warrior civilization, that most of their daily activities were not military training exercises, and that the coordination and competence the aliens had observed was just people doing their jobs or participating in recreational activities. Flixomatic listened to these explanations with growing amazement, not because he was surprised to learn that humans were not warriors, but because he was astounded that beings capable of such casual competence in complex tasks considered these abilities to be ordinary. "You mean," he said slowly, "that the female operative at the resource conversion facility was not demonstrating advanced military coordination, but was simply working? Her name is Marlene, and yes, she was just doing her job as a waitress," Miranda confirmed. "It's not unusual for people to handle multiple tasks simultaneously while providing customer service." Flixomatic made notes on his diplomatic data pad with the sort of intense concentration typically reserved for recording military intelligence. "And the space-based operative who was manipulating quantum-level technology?" Astronaut Commander Spacekowski was performing routine maintenance on the International Space Station. "It's standard work for our space program." "Standard work," Flixomatic repeated, his translation device struggling to process the concept that humans considered operating in the vacuum of space while manipulating advanced technology to be routine maintenance. The conversation continued in this manner for several hours, with the humans explaining various aspects of their civilization, while Flixomatic documented everything with the fascination of an anthropologist discovering a completely new form of intelligence. The breakthrough in mutual understanding came when Dr. Miranda Stellarweather offered Flixomatic one of the chocolate chip cookies she had brought as a gesture of hospitality. Flixomatic accepted the cookie with the caution of someone who had been warned about human biochemical weapons, examined it carefully with a portable analysis device, and then took a tentative bite. The expression that crossed his alien features was one of pure revelation. The Korthvak had never encountered anything quite like chocolate chip cookies. Their civilization had achieved advanced space travel, energy weapons, and interstellar communication, but their food technology had focused primarily on efficiency and nutrition rather than flavor and pleasure. "This is..." Flixomatic paused, searching for words in a language that had 17 different terms for military conquest, but had never needed to describe the experience of tasting something that was designed purely to make people happy. "This is extraordinary." "It's just a cookie," Miranda replied, offering him another one from the plate. "Just a cookie," Flixomatic repeated, making more notes. "Humans create these chemical compounds designed to produce immediate psychological satisfaction, and they consider this normal? We like things that taste good," Dr. Jenkins explained. "It's not really about psychological manipulation. We just enjoy eating things that are pleasant." This concept, creating things purely because they brought joy rather than serving strategic or survival purposes, was so foreign to Korthvak, thinking that Flixomatic spent several minutes recalibrating his understanding of human motivation. "Your species," he said finally, "creates objects designed solely to increase happiness and satisfaction, with no strategic military value whatsoever." "Well, yeah," Miranda said, wondering if she should mention ice cream or if that might cause an interstellar incident. "We do lots of things just because they make us feel good. Art, music, entertainment, good food, it's all part of human culture." Flixomatic was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. In Korthvak society, everything served a purpose related to conquest, expansion, or military efficiency. The idea that an intelligent species would devote significant resources to activities that served no strategic purpose but simply made life more enjoyable was revolutionary. "I must report this to Commander Zixthala immediately," he announced, reaching for his communication device. "This changes our entire understanding of your civilization." The conversation that followed, transmitted across space to the Korthvac fleet, would become legendary in galactic diplomatic circles. Commander Zixthala listened as Flixomatic explained that humans were not actually advanced warriors pretending to be civilians, but were actually civilians who were so naturally competent at complex tasks that they made routine activities look like military exercises. "Commander," Flixomatic reported with barely contained excitement, "they're not hiding their true nature. This is their true nature. They've created a civilization based on the principle that life should be enjoyable, and they've become so good at everything that what we interpreted as military training is just how they live." Back on the doomship Obliterator, Commander Zixthala was experiencing what his species would later classify as an existential epiphany. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that we surrendered to a species that accidentally became incredibly capable because they were trying to make their lives more pleasant?" "Exactly, sir. And Commander, they've offered to teach us how to make these cookies. I believe this could revolutionize our entire approach to civilization." This transmission was overheard by Sub-Commander Klaxneth, who had been conducting his own analysis of human behavior patterns. "Commander," he interjected, "I've been studying their information networks, and I believe I understand what makes them so formidable." "Explain," Zixthala ordered, though he was beginning to suspect that every explanation would only make the situation more bewildering. "Sir, they've created a system where every individual is simultaneously a specialist in their particular field and a generalist capable of adapting to unexpected situations. They don't train for specific combat scenarios. They train for life, which apparently includes every possible scenario we could imagine and several we couldn't." Klaxneth displayed his analysis on the main screen, showing a compilation of human activities he had observed: people solving complex problems at work, adapting to technical failures, managing emergencies, learning new skills, and generally dealing with the random chaos of daily existence, with the sort of flexible competence that military academies spent decades trying to instill in their graduates. "Look at this example," Klaxneth continued, showing footage of a human emergency room during a busy night. "They're simultaneously coordinating multiple crisis situations, making life or death decisions under pressure, communicating complex technical information across specialized teams, and doing it all while maintaining emotional stability and interpersonal relationships. And, sir, they do this every day, for decades." Commander Zixthala watched the footage with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of the universe was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt. "They're not warriors," he murmured. "They're just really good at being alive." "Yes, sir. And they've offered to share their knowledge with us. I think we might learn more from them about effectiveness and efficiency than they could ever learn from our military technology." Ray. This conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from Flixomatic, who had spent the past hour being given a tour of the radio observatory by Carlos Mopsalot, the senior janitor, who had turned out to be unexpectedly knowledgeable about both facility maintenance and interstellar communication theory. "Commander," Flixomatic reported, "I've just learned something that I think explains why we found their capabilities so intimidating." "What now?" Zixthala asked, though he was beginning to think that maybe he should just accept that everything he thought he knew about warfare and civilization was probably wrong. "Sir, they don't specialize the way we do. The individual who showed me their facility maintenance systems also has extensive knowledge of their communication technology, recreational mathematics, local history, and something called fantasy football. which appears to be a complex strategic simulation that they engage in for entertainment, while simultaneously managing their actual careers and personal relationships. Zixathala processed this information with the growing realization that the Korthvak approach to civilization might be fundamentally inefficient. You're saying that their maintenance worker is also qualified in multiple advanced technical fields? Sir, according to him, this is completely normal. Humans apparently acquire knowledge and skills continuously throughout their lives, often in areas completely unrelated to their primary occupations, just because they find it interesting or useful. Back on Earth, Carlos Mopsalot was explaining to Flixomatic how he had learned about radio astronomy during his 30 years of working at the observatory, how he had gotten interested in mathematics after helping his daughter with her homework, and how his weekend hobby of building model rockets had led to a surprisingly detailed understanding of orbital mechanics. You see, Carlos explained, completely unaware that he was providing intelligence that would revolutionize alien understanding of human development. When you work around smart people doing interesting things, you pick stuff up. And when you've got kids, you end up learning all kinds of things you never thought you'd need to know. Plus, there's the internet. You can learn about pretty much anything if you've got time and curiosity. Flixomatic was documenting this conversation with the intensity of someone who had just discovered the secret to universal advancement. The concept that humans continuously acquired knowledge across multiple disciplines, not for strategic advantage, but simply because they were curious, was completely foreign to Korthvak culture. In Korthvak society, individuals were trained for specific roles within the military hierarchy and remained specialists in those areas throughout their careers. The idea that someone could simultaneously be competent in facility maintenance, advanced mathematics, engineering, and strategic simulation while also maintaining family relationships and personal interests suggested a level of cognitive flexibility that the Korthvak had never imagined possible. Carlos, Flixomatic said carefully, is this level of multidisciplinary knowledge common among your species? Oh, sure, Carlos replied, adjusting something on a communication panel that had been giving the technicians trouble for weeks. I mean, everybody's got their thing, but most people know a little bit about a lot of things. My wife teaches elementary school, but she also does photography and knows more about gardening than most professional botanists. My neighbor Bob works in accounting, but he rebuilds car engines on weekends and makes his own furniture. It's just normal. Flixomatic was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that would change the course of galactic civilization. Carlos, would you be willing to teach me how to make furniture? This request led to what would later be known as the Great Cultural Exchange, though it started much more modestly, with Carlos showing Flixomatic his workshop and explaining the basic principles of woodworking, while Dr. Miranda Stellarweather tried to figure out the proper diplomatic protocols for a situation that definitely wasn't covered in any of the first contact manuals. Over the following weeks, more Korthvak representatives arrived on Earth, not as conquerors or even as formal diplomats, but as students eager to learn about human approaches to problem-solving, creativity, and life management. They were particularly fascinated by human educational systems, which seemed designed to produce individuals capable of adapting to almost any situation rather than specialists trained for specific, predetermined roles. Commander Zixathala himself eventually made the journey to Earth, not in the doom ship Obliterator, but in a small diplomatic vessel, accompanied by a cultural exchange team that included scientists, engineers, artists, and what the Korthvak called life optimization specialists, but what humans would recognize as therapists and social workers. His first stop was the same Denny's where his scouts had first observed Marlene Crankshaw, demonstrating what they had interpreted as advanced military coordination. Marlene, who had been briefed about the alien visitors but had been asked to just treat them like regular customers, served Commander Zixathala coffee and pie, while simultaneously managing 4 other tables, training a new waitress, and discussing weekend plans with Bob the cook. Commander Zixathala watched this performance with the same awe he had felt when first observing it through surveillance. But now, with the understanding that this was not a military demonstration, but simply someone who was really good at her job because she cared about doing it well. "Marlene," he said carefully, using the translation device that Flixomatic had modified to better handle casual human conversation, "may I ask how you developed such extraordinary coordination and situational awareness?" Marlene paused in the act of refilling his coffee cup and looked at him with the expression of someone who had been asked to explain something so fundamental that she had never really thought about it. "Well, honey," she said finally, "you just pay attention to what needs doing and you do it. Been working here 15 years, so I guess you could say I've had practice. Plus, you learn to keep track of things when you've got kids at home and bills to pay. You kind of have to be good at juggling multiple things, or everything falls apart." Commander Zixathala made notes with the same intensity he had once reserved for battle plans. "And this ability to juggle multiple things is something all humans develop?" "Most people, yeah. I mean, some folks are better at it than others. But everybody's got something they're good at managing. My sister can handle 3 kids, a full-time job, and night school all at the same time. My brother-in-law can fix pretty much anything with an engine while keeping track of his fantasy football league and coaching Little League baseball. It's just life, you know?" This conversation was being monitored by the other members of the Korthvak Cultural Exchange Team, who were simultaneously having similar revelations at various locations around Earth. Dr. Groxmar was observing a high school mathematics teacher who was simultaneously explaining calculus to 30 teenagers, managing classroom behavior, adapting her lesson plan in real time based on student comprehension, and planning her daughter's birthday party. Subcommander Klaxneth was following a paramedic crew who demonstrated the ability to make split-second medical decisions under pressure while maintaining perfect communication and emotional support for patients and families. But perhaps the most significant cultural exchange was happening at a suburban soccer field, where Junior Ambassador Flixomatic was observing what he had originally interpreted as military training for 8-year-olds, but now understood to be recreational sports. He watched as Coach Patricia Soccermom managed 20 energetic children, taught them teamwork and strategy, handled minor injuries and major emotional crises, communicated with parents, and maintained everyone's enthusiasm and focus, all while ensuring that everyone had fun and learned something valuable. "Coach Patricia," Flixomatic asked during halftime, "how do you maintain such effective leadership while ensuring the emotional well-being of all participants?" Coach Patricia, who was simultaneously handing out orange slices, retying shoelaces, and giving an encouraging pep talk to a player who was upset about missing a goal, looked at him with the sort of patient expression typically reserved for people who ask complex questions during obviously busy moments. "Well," she said, "you just remember that they're kids, and the point is for them to have fun and learn to work together. Everything else is just details." This simple statement would later be analyzed by Korthvak philosophers for decades as a fundamental principle of effective leadership. The concept that successful management of complex systems could be based on clearly defined positive objectives rather than elaborate strategic planning was revolutionary to a civilization that had built its entire social structure around military hierarchy and conquest-based goals. The cultural exchange program expanded rapidly as more humans became involved in teaching aliens about human approaches to everything from conflict resolution to creative problem-solving. Professor Mumblebottom found himself hosting a seminar on radio astronomy for beings whose technology was far more advanced than anything humans had developed, but who had never considered the possibility that scientific research could be motivated by curiosity rather than strategic advantage. "You see," Professor Mumblebottom explained to his alien audience, "we study the universe not because we need to know these things for any particular purpose, but because understanding how things work is inherently satisfying. Knowledge for its own sake is one of humanity's greatest achievements." This concept proved to be another revolutionary idea for the Korthvak. Their scientific research had always been directed towards specific military or technological goals. The idea that intelligent beings would devote significant resources to learning about things simply because they wanted to understand them better suggested a fundamentally different approach to existence. Dr. Miranda Stellarweather, who had become the unofficial coordinator of the cultural exchange program, found herself in the unique position of trying to explain humanity to beings who had spent weeks terrified of human capabilities, but were now eager to learn human approaches to life management. "The thing you have to understand," she explained to Commander Zixthala during one of their regular diplomatic sessions, "is that humans don't optimize for efficiency the way your civilization does. We optimize for sustainability, adaptability, and satisfaction. We want to be good at things, but we also want to enjoy our lives." Commander Zixthala had been taking extensive notes on human philosophy and social organization. And this approach produces individuals who are simultaneously specialists in their chosen fields and generalists capable of adapting to unexpected situations. Exactly. We don't train people to be perfect at one thing. We try to help people develop the ability to learn and adapt so they can handle whatever life throws at them. It's messier than your way, but it's more flexible. This flexibility had become increasingly apparent to the Korthvak as they observed human responses to the alien visitors. Rather than following rigid first contact protocols, humans had simply adapted their existing social structures to accommodate new circumstances. Teachers had started including alien visitors in their classes. Restaurants had begun experimenting with foods that might appeal to alien digestive systems, and local government officials had developed new permit categories for interstellar cultural exchange activities. The most significant development came when Carlos Mopsalot, who had become something of a celebrity among the Korthvak cultural exchange team, suggested that the aliens might benefit from participating in what he called human problem-solving exercises. "See, the thing about humans," Carlos explained to a group of alien researchers, "is that we're really good at figuring things out as we go along. You folks seem to like having detailed plans for everything, but sometimes you just gotta improvise." This led to the Great Improvisation Experiment, in which groups of humans and aliens were given various challenges to solve together without advanced planning. The results were simultaneously enlightening and hilarious. The first challenge involved assembling furniture from a popular Swedish retailer without looking at the instructions. The human participants approached this task with the casual confidence of people who had dealt with incomprehensible assembly instructions before, while the Korthvak team members were initially paralyzed by the lack of detailed procedural guidance. "But how do we know if we're doing it correctly without specifications?" asked Dr. Groxmar, staring at a pile of wooden pieces and mysterious hardware. "You just try stuff until it works," replied Janet Handyperson, a local carpenter who had volunteered for the exercise. "Look, this piece obviously goes with this piece because they're the same shape, and these little metal things probably hold them together somehow." The Korthvak watched in fascination as Janet began assembling the furniture through a combination of logical deduction, trial and error, and what she called educated guessing. Within an hour, she had produced a functional bookshelf, while the alien team was still trying to develop a comprehensive analysis strategy. "You just try things?" Sub-Commander Klaxoneth asked, with the tone of someone whose worldview was being systematically reconstructed. "Sure," Janet replied. Worst case scenario, you take it apart and try again. It's not like anybody's gonna die if the bookshelf is weird looking. This casual approach to problem solving, the willingness to attempt solutions without guarantees of success, to learn from failures and to treat mistakes as information rather than disasters, became the foundation of what would later be called the human method of universal optimization. The cultural exchange program continued for months, with both species learning from each other in ways that neither had anticipated. The Korthvac discovered that their advanced technology could be made more efficient and user-friendly by incorporating human principles of adaptive design and intuitive operation. Humans learned about energy systems, space travel, and communication technologies that would advance their civilization by centuries. But the most significant exchange was philosophical. The Korthvac began to understand that power and effectiveness didn't necessarily come from rigid specialization and hierarchical control, but could emerge from systems that prioritized adaptability, creativity, and individual satisfaction. Humans learned that their casual competence and problem-solving abilities were actually remarkable achievements that other civilizations found impressive and worthy of study. Commander Zixathala, who had arrived on Earth as a conqueror and had become something closer to a student, spent his final weeks on the planet working with human educators to develop new approaches to Korthvac social organization. His final report to the Galactic Council would revolutionize their understanding of effective civilization management. "The humans," he wrote, "have achieved something that we believed was impossible. They have created a society that optimizes for individual happiness and collective effectiveness simultaneously. Their approach to life produces individuals who are simultaneously specialized enough to excel in their chosen fields and generalized enough to adapt to any unexpected situation. They have turned the process of living into a form of continuous education, and they have made this education enjoyable rather than burdensome." And the report continued with detailed recommendations for restructuring Korthvac society based on human principles, including suggestions for educational reform, social organization, and what he called the systematic integration of recreational optimization into productivity enhancement protocols, which was the Korthvac way of saying people work better when they're having fun. The final ceremony of the cultural exchange program took place not in a formal diplomatic setting, but in Carlos Mopsalot's backyard, where he had built a barbecue pit designed to accommodate both human and Korthvac dietary requirements. The gathering included aliens, astronomers, restaurant workers, teachers, janitors, coaches, and various other humans who had participated in the exchange program. As the evening wound down, Commander Zixathala stood to address the group with what had become the Korthvac equivalent of a toast, though it required translation because it involved several concepts that didn't exist in human language. "Before we encountered your species," he said, "we believed that strength came from domination, that intelligence meant specialization, and that efficiency required rigid control. You have shown us that true power comes from adaptability, that wisdom includes the willingness to learn continuously, and that the most effective systems are those that make their participants want to contribute." He paused, looking around at the group of humans who had accidentally terrified the galaxy's most advanced military civilization simply by being competent at their daily lives. "We came here to conquer you," he continued, "and instead you conquered us with cookies, furniture assembly instructions, and the revolutionary idea that life should be enjoyable as well as productive." Dr. Miranda Stellarweather, who had been taking notes throughout the cultural exchange program and was already working on what would become the definitive academic work on human-alien diplomatic protocols, raised her glass in response. "Well," she said with the sort of diplomatic understatement that would be quoted in interstellar relations textbooks for generations, "we're glad it worked out." The Korthvac fleet departed Earth 3 days later, but not as conquerors returning home with tales of victory. They left as students carrying new ideas about civilization, effectiveness, and the possibility that the universe might be a more interesting place than they had previously imagined. Word of the cultural exchange spread throughout the galaxy, transmitted through the same communication networks that had originally carried news of human military capabilities. But now the messages were different. Instead of warnings about a dangerous warrior civilization, the galaxy received reports about a species that had achieved remarkable effectiveness through principles that most civilizations had never considered. Within a year, Earth was receiving visitors from dozens of other species, all eager to learn about human approaches to education, problem-solving, and what the galactic community had begun calling applied life optimization. The planet became an unofficial center for interstellar cultural exchange, with humans teaching aliens everything from conflict resolution to creative cooking, while learning about technologies and perspectives that expanded their understanding of what was possible. But perhaps the most significant long-term consequence of the Great Misunderstanding was the gradual transformation of galactic civilization itself. As more species adopted human-inspired approaches to social organization and individual development, the galaxy became a more collaborative and less hierarchical place. Wars became less common, not because of superior military technology, but because civilizations discovered that they could achieve their goals more effectively through cooperation and cultural exchange. The Galactic Council, which had originally been organized around principles of conquest and territorial control, gradually evolved into something more resembling a cosmic university, where species shared knowledge, techniques, and approaches to the fundamental challenge of creating societies that worked well for their participants. And at the center of this transformation was the simple recognition that the most powerful force in the universe might not be advanced technology or military might, but the ability to live well while remaining open to learning new things. The story of how humanity accidentally conquered the galaxy simply by being human became a legend told throughout the stars, though different species emphasized different aspects of the tale. Some focused on the strategic brilliance of a civilization that could appear peaceful while remaining formidable. Others emphasized the philosophical revolution of optimizing for happiness alongside effectiveness. Still others were most impressed by the human ability to turn any situation into an opportunity for learning and growth. But perhaps the most accurate version of the story was the one told by Marlene Crankshaw, who had returned to her normal routine at Denny's after briefly becoming the most famous waitress in galactic history. "Bunch of folks from space showed up," she would tell curious customers. "Thought we were scary because we're good at our jobs. Turned out they just needed to learn how to relax a little and figure things out as they go along. Nice people, actually. Left decent tips." And in the end, that might have been the most human response of all, to treat the most significant diplomatic event in galactic history as just another interesting day at work, handled with competence, kindness, and the sort of practical wisdom that comes from years of experience in making sure everyone gets what they need while keeping things running smoothly. The universe had indeed changed, but not because of conquest or technological revolution. It had changed because one species had demonstrated that it was possible to be powerful without being threatening, effective without being rigid, and confident without being arrogant. Humanity never did figure out what made them so intimidating to aliens, but they didn't really need to understand it to share it.